tid. Today, let's explore what ripples of change this quiet rebellion set in motion. How often does being good at something make us take it for granted? Like baking a cake. We measure, mix, and blend until golden-hued batter fills our bowl thin. Then, without a second thought, we pour it into a pan. That's exactly what happened to me with language. From crafting stories to writing letters, words have always been my thing. But lately, I've been pouring my whole heart and soul into narrating audiobooks. It's a side gig. I started to spice things up, and boy, did I hit the sauce. Now, don't get me wrong, I love both. But sometimes I wish I had someone narrating my life. But just imagine. You could start your day with a captivating mystery, travel the world with a thrilling adventure, or learn about ancient Rome while sipping your coffee. The best part, you don't need time to read. Knowledge Power has got your back with a 30-day satisfaction guarantee. And here's why you should join today. For starters, it's like having a personal tutor, but way cooler. You can ask questions, highlight key points, and even share notes. Plus, if you don't jive with a particular lesson, no worries. Simply skip it and move on to the next. It's all about finding what works for you. As days melted into weeks, whispers rippled through the neighborhood. Colors in Miriam's garden became impossible to ignore. Some sunflowers taller than children now turned their faces upward, heavy with gold. Crimson poppies nodded to the deep red cardinal sitting on her fence. Honeysuckle spilled its perfume on the walkways and butterflies became regular guests. One sunny afternoon, while tending to her fig tree, Miriam saw movement at the end of the lane. It was a young girl, hair like spun gold, skipping toward her with bright eyes and bare feet. She stopped at the flowers, inhaled their fragrance, and looked up at Miriam. "Carden is alive," she said, and in that moment, Miriam understood. Curl hadn't just come to explore colors or gather wildflowers. She was thirsty, deeply thirsty. Carden. And the garden had offered her something no textbook or lecture hall ever could: a thirst for life. Turned, her eyes shining with delight, and ran off, calling to someone named Thomas. Later, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, painting the sky with hues of apricot and rose, Miriam saw them again, Thomas and his sister, hand in hand, noses pressed against her fence. "Can we touch?" Curl asked, pointing to the feathery plumes of an ornamental grass. Before Miriam could reply, Thomas had slipped through the gate. He walked carefully, almost reverently, among the plants. He touched a leaf here, cradled a flower there, and when he turned back, his eyes were filled with wonder. "It's so peaceful here," he whispered. And that's when Miriam knew she wasn't just tending a garden. She was cultivating a refuge, a place where city life hushed its clamor and hearts could reconnect with the colors and calm of nature. It was a sanctuary where imagination bloomed alongside the sunflowers, where curiosity took root like the honeysuckle, and where the language of nature spoke louder than any rulebook. Koheng. In a world that often felt more gray than green, Miriam's garden was a vibrant testament to life. A place where even the smallest sprout carried the promise of color, and where each leaf unfurled like a whispered secret, just waiting to be discovered. I hope you're having a wonderful start to your weekend. I have a little story I want to share with you, and then we'll do some yoga, so let's just settle in now. Imagine the cool evening air brushing against your skin, like the gentle hand of the earth itself, reminding you to slow down. Mr. Anderson, who often walked his dog twice a day, slowed down by her gate. He usually looked away, eyes fixed forward, but now he paused. He tipped his cap, looked at the towering hollyhocks, and nodded once before continuing down the lane. That small moment passed like a breeze, but left a ripple. The dog came back. He trotted back to Miriam. He looked up at her with soft brown eyes and barked once, then twice. The sight that greeted them was nothing short of magical. It bloomed quietly, persistently, flower by flower, smile by smile. And as the seasons turned and the years rolled by, the impact of those small acts would only grow, weaving a tapestry of connection that enriched the lives of everyone who called this place home. The front yard, once a canvas of monotonous grass and lifeless concrete. Settle in now and let's move through this sequence together. Bees and butterflies danced among the newly planted flowers, their wings a blur of motion as they sipped sweet nectar from the blossoms. Air thrummed with life, a testament to the power of small acts of kindness and the magic that unfolds when neighbors become friends. He whined softly, nudging her hand with his wet nose. As if understanding, she dropped a few seeds into the palm of his paw, which he carefully carried back to his owner. Mr. Anderson's eyes met hers, gratitude and understanding shining in their depths. This wasn't just about flowers, or even their shared love of nature. It was about connection, about finding common ground in a sea of sameness. It was a silent acknowledgement of the beauty that can blossom when hearts are open and hands are outstretched. Listen to the soft creak of a porch swing and the hush of twilight falling like silk. A few days after Miriam received that folded message, something subtle began to shift. It started with a glance from a neighbor, Care. Their backpacks slung carelessly on the sidewalk. They watched a butterfly rest on a milkweed leaf. They whispered to each other, smiling, quiet, not out of shyness, but reverence. Later that week, a gentle knock echoed at her door. Mrs. Lynn from down the lane, holding a small envelope. Not from the committee, but handwritten in soft blue ink. Your time grows beautifully. May I ask where you found the seeds? Miriam replied with a little pouch of her own harvest. A gift passed through open palms. The next morning, Miriam noticed 2 children crouched near her fence. Soon, front yards began to look slightly different. Not loud changes, no great upheavals, but hints. A patch of daisies where mulch once lay. An old ceramic bowl placed beneath the hedges to catch rain for birds. His dog. A gentle golden retriever, panting happily at his side. Was hoping, he began, his voice gruff with emotion. I was hoping you might have some of that wildflower seed. Miriam smiled, her heart brimming with a joy that had nothing to do with winning or losing a battle. Course, she said, rising to join him. She gathered a handful of seeds, their dry, feathery lightness a comfort in her palm. Together, they walked down the street, two figures silhouetted against the fiery hues of sunset, sharing a simple gift that spoke volumes without a word. The neighborhood didn't stop being itself. It just softened. Evening walks slowed. Porch lights stayed on a little longer. Conversations drifted out with the scent of marjoram and basil. Clue. And then one evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long shadows that stretched like old friends, Mr. Anderson stopped by Miriam's porch. As they walked, Mr. Anderson's dog sniffed at the air, tail wagging, and then trotted ahead, disappearing around the corner. When they reached Mr. Anderson's house, a symphony of buzzing and humming filled the air. In this neighborhood, change didn't come from grand gestures or sweeping pronouncements. Kabuniar, my friends. I hope that story brought you some joy. What if your biggest fear was also your greatest strength? Let's drift even deeper now. Imagine the soft thrum of a hummingbird hovering nearby, the warmth of sun-soaked wood beneath bare feet, and the rustle of old paper being unfolded with care. A week had passed since Miriam tucked that printed letter into her drawer. She hadn't spoken of it to anyone. Mrs. Lynn's yard had grown little wild daisies near the mailbox, each bloom a brushstroke, each leaf a whispered word. We're nudged by whispers of change, but truly transformative journeys begin with a single step. Maybe it's a whispered dream, a yearning for something more, or a quiet voice urging us to be brave. Sometimes the call is subtle, like the first bloom of spring, yet its impact can be profound. Her garden sang in a language older than words. It spoke of sun and soil, of patient hands, and watchful eyes. It murmured tales of tiny miracles, seeds yielding bounty, bulbs pushing through, birds finding haven. Her sanctuary bloomed in vibrant defiance, yet it wasn't about winning. It wasn't about proving them wrong. Kahaha. It was about sharing a truth as enduring as wildflowers. Clem. And 2 houses down, someone had placed a small wooden sign that read, "Let it grow." A few days later, another envelope arrived, cream-colored, stamped, official. Miriam opened it while sipping her tea. Her journey began with a dream, a vision of beauty amidst the mundane. When the harsh letter arrived, it could have crushed her spirit. But within that setback, there was a choice: to let fear take root, or to tend a different garden, one that bloomed with resilience and quiet strength. A friendly reminder to maintain visual standards and a list of guidelines. It was almost identical to the first letter, C. She smiled. In that moment, Miriam realized the true power of her garden. It wasn't just about flowers or foliage, but about embracing life's uncertainties, nurturing dreams, and letting them take flight. It was a testament to the human spirit's tenacity and the transformative power of hope. Garden, once a refuge, had become a symbol of strength, whispering tales of courage and quiet dignity to all who took the time to listen. It was a legacy of beauty and resilience, proving that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with a single seed and a dream. Cut, not in defiance, not in sarcasm, just softly. And she placed it gently next to the first one, unwrinkled, untouched. Then, with a steady hand, she reached for her gardening gloves. Outside, the wind waited. The sun glowed a little stronger, and the bees always working carried the spirit of her story from bloom to bloom. Not out of secrecy, but because it didn't matter. Instead, she kept tending, slow, mindful work, clipping lavender for drying, planting sweet alyssum beneath the elderberry bush, sprinkling crushed eggshells around tomato roots, whispering thanks as she worked. One morning, just after sunrise, a gentle knock came again. This time, it was Jonah, a boy from 2 doors down who usually rode past her garden with headphones in. "Hi," he said softly, holding out a painted rock. It was speckled with dots and little stars. On the back, just 2 words, "Be safe." Miriam knelt, accepted it like a sacred gift, and placed it at the base of her tallest sunflower. That day, she found 2 more rocks on the edge of her walkway, one with a heart, another with a tiny clover. None were signed, none were explained, but she understood. Somewhere between the petals and the stillness, her garden had started telling stories of its own, and neighbors had begun listening in quiet ways. She noticed Mr. Andelson now lingered near her sagebush. Miriam hummed as she weeded, snipped, and watered. There are moments when our paths diverge, when decisions echo with consequences. She remembered the hesitant steps into the unknown, the first tentative blooms she'd planted, the whispered hopes amidst the weeds. And then, as if echoing her thoughts, a butterfly alighted on a sunflower, its wings painted with the hues of a setting sun. Now allow yourself to breathe even deeper. Feel the softness of evening air brushing your skin like silk. Earth. Hear the low hum of insects, the distant hoot of an owl, and a gentle breeze teasing wind chimes just beyond the porch. But it began with a new sound. A gentle creak. Miriam's old garden gate had swung open not from wind or mischief, but from a knock, soft and measured. She opened the door and found a group of neighbors standing just outside the path. Not in protest, not with papers, but with baskets. Baskets filled with things. Jeer of honey from Mrs. Lynn. Handmade soap from the girl across the lane. A bag of marigold seeds from Jonah's mother. We need a place to breathe. We need a moment of quiet. We can hold on to them tightly, carry them in our hearts until we can find that stillness again. Because in that stillness, we find ourselves. We find our connection to the world around us. And we find the strength to keep going. And sometimes that stillness looks like a walk in the woods. Feel the stillness all around you. Let it fill you up, calm you down, and remind you that you are enough. Just as you are, perfectly imperfect. Thank you for being here. Thank you for breathing with me. And may your day be filled with moments of stillness, of joy, peace, and perfect imperfection. See you next time. Sometimes it sounds like the laughter of children, and sometimes it feels like the warmth of the sun on our skin. What does your stillness look? We just thought, one of them began. Maybe your garden is right. Maybe we've forgotten what it means to grow wild. Miriam stepped aside. Come in, she said gently. Let the breeze greet you first. See. They wandered through winding lavender, past the thyme beds, listening to the hum of bees and the whispers of the earth. One by one, they relaxed. Shoulders dropped. Voices soft. Jonah ran his fingers across Lamb's ear leaves. Mrs. Lynn found a forgotten memory in the scent of lemon balm. And Mr. Andelson chuckled softly as a butterfly landed on his sleeve. No one mentioned rules. No one spoke of structure. For those few minutes, all that mattered was this space, this moment, this freedom to breathe differently. One dusky Thursday. The rhythm of the neighborhood paused. It wasn't loud, not dramatic. She looked at the old gate, still ajar, and she smiled. Not because the world had changed in one evening, but because it had begun to remember how, that night, after the neighbors left, Miriam sat on her porch swing. The sky stretched violet and gold. Crickets sang below. Do you have a place where you can just breathe? Sometimes it's hard to find that stillness. Life can get noisy and chaotic, but maybe, just maybe, it's already there. Maybe it's waiting for you to remember. How do you find the stillness in your day? How do you tend to the wild places inside of you? In the midst of all the changes happening in our world, we're reminded of something that remains constant. When life feels out of balance, when noise and chaos threaten to consume us. So take a deep breath in. This is a true story about a woman who dared to break the rules, bloom where she was planted, and sparked a quiet revolution in her neighborhood. Now, close your eyes. If you haven't already, feel the deep stillness of twilight wrapping around you like a soft blanket. Imagine the sky brushed in sleepy hues of rose and amber. Hear the sigh of wind passing gently through maple leaves, about the way certain flowers follow the sun, about the magic of compost and forgotten seeds. Time, it seemed to stand still, measured only by the rustling leaves and the gentle ticking of the old clock on Miriam's porch. It was a symphony of colors, textures, and fragrances, a testament to life's simple yet profound beauty. As the afternoon deepened, Mr. Lewin, the once stern committee chair, was transformed. His shoulder, which always seemed squared, now relaxed. His face, usually etched with seriousness, now softened. When Mr. Lewin stood to leave, he didn't mention her violations. key didn't carry a warning call. He simply turned to her as he stepped down the path and said, "Maybe we need to grow differently now." And Miriam, she returned to her porch swing, cradled by the late afternoon sun, the scent of her blooming cosmos heavy in the air. She knew then that change, like a stubborn weed, had taken root. It bloomed not in anger, but in quiet understanding. She had shown her neighborhood the power of blooming where you are planted. And now, like a pebble tossed into a still pond, her actions were sending out ripples of change. The world, she thought, was slowly remembering how to listen. To the language of flowers, the whisper of the wind, the song of the birds. The stories that bind us, and the dreams that lift our spirits. The air is alive with the sweet, drowsy hum of honeybees, returning to their hives. Let the tranquility of Miriam's garden soothe your soul, reminding you that even in the most ordinary of places, magic can unfold. For life, like a garden, is full of surprises. All you need to do is bloom where you replanted and listen to the whispers of the wind. Somewhere nearby, a lone guitar strums a soft chord, a gentle melody that seems to echo the quiet contentment. This moment of tranquility, this stolen slice of nature's peace, is your reward. For it's here, in these closing moments, where stories like Miriam's come to life. A story that unfolded not in some distant land, but in a typical neighborhood much like ours. In the days that followed that quiet gathering in Miriam's garden, a still ripple moved across the neighborhood. The kind of ripple you don't see right away, but you feel it. You feel it in the slowed footsteps of passers-by, in the silence between words, in the morning light falling more tenderly across dew-speckled lawns, cool morning after a soft rain. Miriam received a knock. 3 taps, thoughtful and It was the neighborhood's committee chair, Mr. Lewin. He held no paper this time. No envelope, notebook, tucked beneath his arm, and a wool cap sitting low on his brow. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, pointing to the swing. Miriam nodded. The wood creaked softly as he settled in. They didn't speak for a while. Birds flitted in and out of the rosemary. Somewhere in the distance, a wind chime sang a low note, Kung Lee. Mr. Lewin cleared his throat. "Garden," he said. "Before all this responsibility." Miriam offered him a warm mug of tea, chamomile and honey. "You can have one again," she said softly. He smiled. Not the kind people wear at meetings, but the kind worn when remembering something nearly lost. "Thank you," he whispered, his gaze drifting to the vibrant blooms nodding in the breeze. "It's beautiful what you've done here." They talked, not about rules, but about roots, tea. And so, dear listener, as the day surrenders to twilight and the stars begin their nightly dance, we invite you to rest a while. Hello, friends. Now let your shoulders drop just a little more. Feel the soft hush of early evening, as if the world is holding its breath for just a moment longer. Picture the scent of pine and damp earth drifting through an open window, and the gentle rhythm of cicadas beginning their lullaby. By the following week, something subtle but remarkable was growing. Not just the daisies now popping up beside the mailbox posts, or the small herb planters appearing along fence lines. At the end of the trail, a sign crafted from wood, with childlike paint read "Bug Sanctuary." Please tread kindly. It wasn't hers. This happened slowly. See, it was a series of small gestures and exchanges that changed the way we related to each other and to our surroundings. It began with curiosity. Why was there a trail of stones in the grass? What kind of flowers can grow in the shade of a pear tree? How do you make a bug hotel? We started asking each other these questions because we genuinely wanted to know the answers. And in seeking those answers, we discovered shared interests and a common purpose. Our conversations became less strained and more enjoyable. We learned to listen to each other and to appreciate the different perspectives we brought to our shared space. We also learned to accept and respect each other's differences. For example, I discovered that my neighbor loves birds, so I planted some berry bushes to attract them. In return, she agreed to let me keep the pear tree, which is a habitat for many insects and small animals, but it belonged. She followed the trail, barefoot, and smiled at the tiny patch where beetles darted beneath leaves, and a praying mantis stood like a sentry in the sun. But we've learned how to work through our differences and find common ground, Keezy. And that's what makes this place so special. It's not just a neighborhood, it's a community of people who are working together to create a shared space that we can all enjoy. Later that afternoon, a child from the neighboring home waved shyly from the sidewalk. What kind of world do you want to live in? A world of rules and regulations, or a world of shared spaces and common purpose? I believe that we can all agree on a few basic principles, like respecting each other's property and not harming the environment. From there, we can work together to create something truly special. Something that reflects the diversity and creativity of our community. I hope it's okay, they said. I wanted the bugs to have a home. Maram knelt beside the trail and whispered, they couldn't have found a better one. No. Something deeper. It was a change in language. Much like this, nobody had asked permission, but somehow, everyone had given it. And in that quiet giving, the neighborhood was changing. The pear tree in my front yard was one of them. It was huge, maybe 40 feet tall, with gnarled branches that scraped against the roof. Every spring, it would drop an avalanche of blossoms, filling the lawn and driveway with petals. I loved it, but my neighbor did not. She wanted the tree removed. When I refused, she filed a complaint with the homeowners association. That was 2 years ago. Now, every time I see her, we talk about what's in bloom and what needs to be planted in the shade, softly, steadily, like a garden left just wild enough. Questions like, what does that flower do in winter? Can I plant something like this near my steps? Would it be all right if we made a bench by the corner tree? Nobody needed a vote. There were no formal motions or committee decisions, just ideas. Planted, and they took root faster than rules ever could. One morning, Miriam noticed a little trail of flat stones leading from her walkway into the grassy patch between her yard and the street. The fences that once marked division now simply held Stories painted rocks tucked into the base, wind chimes crafted from spoons, drawings of bees, taped to wooden planks. When I first moved here, there were already fruit trees lining the streets, planted by the original owners decades ago. It took us a while to find each other in this story, but we are here. It hasn't been easy. There are still times when we disagree on what to do or how to do it. So next time you're in a disagreement with your neighbor, I encourage you to take a step back and consider the bigger picture. This is what our shared spaces can be. They can be a source of beauty, connection, and inspiration for us, and for generations to come. Thank you. Now breathe out gently, as if letting go of a long, quiet sigh. Picture the last light of day glimmering between tall stalks of wild grass, where fireflies have begun their slow ballet above the ground. This is a story about a path. Not just any path, mind you, but a path that held memories, secrets, and a community's forgotten dreams. It begins with a young boy named Jonah, whose spirit of adventure knew no bounds. One day, while exploring the nooks and crannies of his neighborhood, he stumbled upon something extraordinary. Tucked away behind overgrown hedges and fallen branches, almost as if it were hiding from the world, lay an old, barely discernible path. It curved gently along the edge of the neighborhood, connecting the homes to the park and the creek beyond. This wasn't just a path. It was a whisper from the past, a relic of a time when the neighborhood had been new and the houses stood proudly along a scenic route. Over the years, the path had been lost, claimed by nature and forgotten by most. But Jonah, with the curiosity that only children possess, managed to find it. Cover. Excited by his discovery, he raced home to tell his parents, his eyes sparkling with the thrill of the unexpected. But they, like many before them, had allowed the path to fade into obscurity. Determined to uncover the secrets of the forgotten trail, Jonah turned to the one person he knew could help him, his friend Miriam. Together, they set out to explore the path, each step revealing more of its hidden beauty. As they ventured deeper, the sounds of the busy street faded away, replaced by the gentle murmur of the nearby creek. They could almost hear the laughter of children playing, and the friendly chatter of neighbors strolling along the path in days gone by. Death. But their exploration took an unexpected turn when they spotted a curious sight ahead. The sound of trickling water grew louder, leading them to a spot where the old stream had carved its way through the years. And there it was, still flowing merrily below the ridge. As they followed its course, they realized that this was more than just a stream. It was a lifeline to the past, a tangible link to the history that had shaped their community. With renewed determination, Miriam and Jonah continued their journey, eager to discover what other secrets the stream might reveal. As they walked, they couldn't help but feel a sense of ownership over the path, a responsibility to preserve its memory for future generations. Along the way, they shared stories and laughter, their friendship deepening with every step they took. They talked about their dreams for the neighborhood, their hopes for the future, and the importance of remembering their past. As word spread about the forgotten path, others began to take notice. At first, it was just a trickle, a few curious neighbors venturing out to see what all the commotion was about. But soon more and more people started joining in, drawn by the promise of adventure and nostalgia. Children skipped ahead, their laughter echoing in the trees. Couples strolled hand in hand, reminiscing about days gone by. And the elderly returned, reliving the memories that had been tucked away for so long. Together, they cleared the debris, uncovered the landmarks, and breathed new life into the forgotten path. It became a place of community, a symbol of unity, and a reminder of the importance of preserving history. And so the forgotten path was reclaimed, not as a divisive boundary, but as a unifying force, bringing people together from all walks of life. It stood as a testament to the power of community, the importance of preserving history, and the magic that happens when people come together to create something beautiful. Now, rest your hands in your lap or by your side. Let your breath drift effortlessly in and out. Imagine the warmth of twilight sinking into your skin, like honey settling into tea. Not just in the soil, not just between neighbors, but in the space between rules and trust. The HOA board, once a wall between people and their instincts, healed memories, hopes, and the quiet strength of a community finding its voice. It was here in the nurturing embrace of the garden that the true essence of community blossomed. It was in the shared laughter, the calloused hands reaching for the same trowel. The stories exchanged over wilting tomatoes and overgrown weeds. It was in the understanding glances, the silent support, and the collective sigh of contentment at the end of a workday well spent. It wasn't a dramatic announcement. No newsletters, no votes. Every seed sown, every weed pulled, every tomato harvested brought them closer together. The rhythm of the seasons became their rhythm, the language of growth and decay, their shared narrative. They learned to read the whispers of the wind through the leaves, the messages carried on the wings of dragonflies, the wisdom etched in the rings of ancient trees. They learned that life, like the garden eaves, ebbs and flows. That stillness can be a source of strength, and that sometimes the most profound connections are made in the quiet moments between the setting sun and the star-studded sky. Just one day, a few board members quietly began asking questions in a different tone. Is this path bringing peace? Does this garden help someone rest? And when they gathered at what used to be strict monthly meetings was under the ash tree. No agenda, no gavel. Just a circle of folding chairs and warm mugs of cinnamon tea passed from hand to hand. Mariam brought a basket of lavender sachets, leaving one on each chair. Jonah's mother baked apple bread, and slices were offered without hesitation. For the first time in years, people listened not to respond, but to understand. Ideas weren't challenged. They were cradled. Someone spoke of starting a seed library. Another offered rain barrels for communal use. Can't. And Mr. Lewin, once bound by binders and protocol, just smiled. "This," he whispered, "is the only meeting that's ever made sense." No one wrote minutes, but everyone remembered. Because when people meet in stillness and truth, there's nothing more official than the way it makes them feel. Imagine the worries of the day melting away, replaced by a deep inner calm. The air was alive with the scent of damp earth and blooming cosmos. Laughter echoed around the arc of the willow tree where children chased fireflies. In the old schoolhouse, now a canvas for community dreams, the walls seemed to sigh with relief. The peeling paint and faded murals, whispering tales of a simpler time. Inside. The air buzzed with activity. At a table by the window, a handful of residents huddled over seeds and seedlings. In the corner, a group sorted tools and potting soil, their voices hushed with purpose. And at the center, under the watchful gaze of a ceramic owl, sat an assortment of mismatched chairs. These weren't just chairs. They were seats of connection, each bearing witness to stories shared and dreams woven into the fabric of the community. And now let's continue with our story. By now, something rare was happening. When the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn, the group made their way to the community garden. The garden was more than just a shared space. It was a sanctuary. As the weeks turned into months, the garden thrived, mirroring the transformation taking place within the hearts of the community. This is a story about a little boy named Jonah. Now close your eyes, let your eyelids. Imagine you're on a street. It's an ordinary street in a typical neighborhood. There are houses, gardens, and a pathway that runs all the way down to the corner store. He's 8 years old with sandy hair and freckles across his nose. One evening while playing outside, he notices something. Looks up and sees the light in the living room window of the house across the street. She opens it to find a plate of cookies and a bottle of milk. On the table, there's a note that reads, "Welcome to the neighborhood." Below it, someone has written, "We'd love for you to join us for our weekly porch light check-in. Every Friday at 8 p.m., we gather on the corner of Maple and Oak to see how everyone's doing." She looks out at the street and sees a group of people standing under their porch lights. There's Jonah and Maya, Mr. Williams, Mrs. Sanchez, and the young couple with 2 kids. They're all smiling and waving at her. Without hesitation, she puts on her brightest smile and joins them. It's a warm yellow glow that reminds him of candlelight. One day a storm rolls in and the power goes out. But as the people on the street walk out to check on each other, they notice that all the porch lights are still on. They're using candles and flashlights to make sure everyone is okay. In that moment, they know they're not alone. They have each other. And that's all that matters. Cug. He wonders why it's still on at this hour. Turn on your own light and know that there are people out there who care about you. Because when we come together and support each other, we can create something truly special. We can create a community. Bin. Then he glances at his own house and realizes his family forgot to turn off the light. Key. He runs inside to switch it off, but not before glancing out the window again. That's when he notices something magical. All the other houses have their lights turned off, too. Only his house and the house across the street have their lights on. It's as if they're sharing a secret. And in that moment, he decides to keep his light on. Gust. In case. The houses look the same from the outside. They have neat lawns and flower boxers overflowing with petunias. But inside those houses live different kinds of families. There's Mr. Williams, who's grumpy because his wife left him. Mrs. Sanchez is worried because her daughter doesn't speak much. The Lee family has a sick father who's very tired. And a young couple with 2 kids moved into the house at the end of the street. So life goes on. The days pass by without anyone noticing anything out of the ordinary. The rhythmic drone of traffic. The distant chatter of people, the chirp of crickets. But something beautiful is about to happen on this street. Something beautiful that will change everything. It's gonna start with a boy. The next day at school, he tells his best friend Maya about what he did last night. She thinks it is a great idea and asks if she can come over after school so they can keep their lights on together. When Jonah comes home, he finds his mom sitting on the couch with a friend. She looks up and smiles when she sees him. Over the next few weeks, more and more houses join the little boy and his friend. At first, it's just a few, then half the street, then all of them. It becomes an unspoken rule. Nobody talks about it, but everyone follows it. They leave their lights on for each other. The entire street is illuminated with a warm glow. It's like a sea of stars twinkling down on the neighborhood. And the people on the street begin to notice the difference. They wave to each other from their porches. They smile and call out hello. They share stories and laughter. A sense of community begins to form. One night, a woman named Miriam hears a knock at her door. As the weeks go by, the porch light pact continues. People help each other out. They share their skills and resources. They look out for one another. So if you're ever feeling lost or alone, just look for the street with the porch lights. Now inhale deeply and exhale slowly, as though you're releasing the weight. In the neighborhood where the sidewalks were paved with good intentions and the hedges were clipped to perfection, there was a house with peeling paint and a garden that grew with wild abandon. It belonged to an artist named Maryam, who believed in the poetry of a messy life. She filled her yard with sculptures made from recycled material, wind chimes that sang in the breeze, and plants that spilled over the fences, chasing butterflies and hummingbirds. He turned around and saw the girl from next door, Maya. Meanwhile, Mariam sat at her kitchen table sipping tea. Kiwi. When she looked out her window, she saw that someone had swept the sidewalk in front of her house. Cardio. She stood back to admire her handiwork when she noticed that the girl was kneeling beside the tree. "Why aren't you inside?" Mariam asked. "My mom says when the thunder roars, we stay indoors," the girl replied. "Well, then I guess we're both missing our manners," Miriam said, laughing. "I'm Miriam." "What's your name?" "Maya," the girl said. And that's how the storm became the best day of the year. The day the fences melted and the walls came tumbling down. It was the first time that had happened since she moved in. As she sipped her tea, she thought about the faces peering from behind the curtains and the neat rows of hedges, the perfectly mowed lawns, and the locked gates. For the first time, she didn't feel the urge to knock down the fences. Instead, she watered the seedlings on her windowsill, dreaming of climbing roses and honeysuckle vines. "Can I help?" she asked, pointing to the tangled mess of garden hoses. John nodded, and together they worked until the last hose was coiled neatly by the fence. When the rain finally stopped, the sky cleared and a rainbow arced across the wet pavement. Jonah walked home, feeling braver than the bravest knight. He'd faced a storm and saved his neighborhood from potential floods. As he stepped inside, his mom knelt down and hugged him. "You didn't come inside when I called you," she said, more surprised than disappointed. "I was helping my neighbor," Jonah replied proudly. We have to take care of each other, especially when the weatherman predicts a storm," his mom said, smiling. Her neighbors saw her art as chaotic, her untamed vegetation as a hazard. They complained about the chipped paint and the overflowing greenery. The chipped paint and the overflowing greenery until the HOA sent her a letter. Snipped dead branches and planted pansies, humming a tuneless song. She didn't notice the gray clouds gathering or the rumbling thunder. She was too busy digging in the dirt. Hand touched her shoulder. She turned around and saw the girl from next door holding out a bird feeder. "Here," the girl said. "For the birds, P." Mariam took the feeder, her fingers brushing against the girl's. She wanted to ask where her parents were, but she didn't. She knew that wasn't her place. Instead, she smiled and said, "Thank you. It's kind of like you read my mind." The girl smiled back and ran off, threatened fines if she didn't clean up her yard. So Mariam did what any reasonable person would do. She locked her gate, turned off her lawn sprinklers, and waited for the storm. Meanwhile, across the street, a boy named Jonah watched the gray clouds gather. He liked stormy weather. While other kids ran home, he'd put on his boots and splash in the puddles. But today his mom pulled him close and said, "When the thunder roars, we stay indoors." See? So Jonah stared out the window as raindrops tapped on the glass. Then he noticed the girl next door hanging laundry on the line. Her name was Maya. She was new in town, and Jonah didn't know much about her, except that she liked to smile. The rain picked up. Jonah opened the back door and dashed outside, splashing in mud puddles and racing around the oak tree. He could hear his mom calling him from inside, but he was too busy making mud pies to care. Suddenly, he heard a crash. He turned around and saw that the wind had knocked over Mrs. Peterson's bird feeder. Jonah walked over to see if any birds had been startled, but he couldn't find any. Coat. He looked around and saw that nobody had secured their garden hoses. Key. He remembered his dad telling him that water can cause a lot of damage when it's left unattended. So Jonah started wrapping hoses around hose bibs and tucking them under bushes. Storm raged. Jonah worked, securing everything he could until he heard footsteps behind him. That night, Jonah dreamed of rainbows and hose reels. The next morning, Miriam woke up early and pulled on her gardening gloves. As the storm hit, Miriam filled the bird feeder and hung it from the oak tree.